Jerry Mathers never planned to become a legend. He never chased it. Never begged for it. Never built a strategy around it the way so many young performers and their ambitious parents did in the golden age of American television. Fame found him before he was old enough to understand what it meant and wrapped itself around him so completely that by the time most children were learning to ride a bicycle, he was already a professional with real credits on real productions. And then, at the exact moment when everything he had built was at its brightest, he made a decision that stunned the people around him, confused the industry that had made him famous, and quietly set him apart from nearly every child star who came before or after him. He walked away. Not because something went wrong. Not because the phone stopped ringing. Not because a scandal pushed him out the door before he could close it himself. He walked away because he chose to. And that choice, made by a 15-year-old boy who had already lived more professional life than most adults ever would, turned out to be one of the most intelligent decisions in the history of American entertainment. But to understand why he left, you have to understand what he was leaving. You have to go back to the beginning, further back than most people realize, back to a time when television itself was still finding its footing in American living rooms, and a 2-year-old boy from Sioux City, Iowa, was already standing in front of a camera with no script, no fear, and no idea that he was about to spend the next 13 years building something the whole country would fall in love with. The world Jerry Mathers was born into on June 2, 1948, was one of possibility and post-war optimism. America was growing fast. Families were moving to suburbs. Living rooms were filling up with television sets that flickered in black and white and brought something entirely new into the home every single night. Advertisers were hungry for faces that felt warm and familiar and real. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise and ambition and commercial energy, a small boy from Iowa walked onto a national television stage and did something most trained performers spend entire careers trying to achieve. He simply was himself. That was the beginning. And once it started, nothing about it was ordinary. What followed would take him through Hollywood sets, through a Hitchcock film, through 6 seasons of television history, through a military uniform, through a college dorm room where a newspaper announced his own death, and finally back to something he had quietly wanted from the very start. Before kindergarten, before he could read a single line of script, Jerry Mathers was already a working professional. That is not an exaggeration built for dramatic effect. That is simply what happened. At 2 years old, he appeared in a pet milk commercial on the Colgate Comedy Hour, sharing the screen with Ed Wynn, a vaudeville legend and one of the most recognized comic performers of his generation. This was not a background moment. This was not a lucky accident where a cute child wandered into frame and charmed the camera by accident. This was a real booking on a real national program, and Jerry Mathers was 2 years old. Most children that age are still learning to form complete sentences. He was performing on national television in front of millions of viewers who had no idea they were watching the beginning of something that would last a lifetime. The bookings kept coming. By 7, he had already moved beyond commercials and into film, and not just any film. Alfred Hitchcock, a director famous for his obsessive attention to detail and his ruthless precision in casting, chose Jerry for The Trouble with Harry, a 1955 black comedy filmed on location in Vermont. Jerry played Arnie Rogers, the young son of a character portrayed by Shirley MacLaine in her very first screen role. So at 7 years old, Jerry Mathers was acting in a Hitchcock production alongside a first-time Shirley MacLaine. That really happened. And it did not happen because someone pulled a favor or because his parents knew the right people. It happened because Hitchcock saw something in the boy that he could not manufacture or teach. He saw naturalness. He saw a child who did not perform so much as simply exist in front of the camera, and in Hitchcock's world, that quality was rarer than talent itself. After that, more opportunities followed in quick succession. Jerry appeared in 2 Bob Hope productions, The 7 Little Foys and That Certain Feeling. He worked alongside Alan Ladd in multiple films. He was building a resume that would have impressed a seasoned adult actor, and he was doing it all before most children his age had finished the 3rd grade. But none of those credits, impressive as they were, prepared anyone for what came next. In 1957, the producers of a new family sitcom were searching for the right boy to anchor their show. They needed someone specific. Not a polished child performer who had been coached into delivering lines with practiced precision. Not a young actor who arrived at auditions already performing before the actual audition had even begun. They needed something harder to find and far more valuable. They needed a real kid. The audition story has been told many times over the years, but it never loses its power because it reveals something true about who Jerry Mathers was before the cameras ever started rolling. When he walked into the room where the producers of Leave It to Beaver were conducting their search, he did something no other child had done that day. He told them, plainly and without apology, that he would rather be at his Cub Scout meeting. No performance. No calculated charm. No carefully rehearsed smile designed to make the adults in the room feel comfortable and impressed. Just a 9-year-old boy saying exactly what was on his mind, the way a real 9-year-old boy actually would. And that single moment of unscripted honesty changed everything. The producers hired him on the spot. Not despite what he said, but because of it. Because the character they were building, Theodore Beaver Cleaver, worked only if the boy playing him felt genuinely real. Beaver was not supposed to be a television child, polished and perfect and slightly too aware of the camera. He was supposed to be the kid next door. The boy who meant well and still managed to find trouble. The child who asked the questions adults had forgotten how to ask. Jerry already was that boy without trying, and the producers understood immediately that no amount of coaching or rehearsal would ever manufacture what he brought into that room naturally. The show premiered on October 4, 1957, first on CBS and later on ABC, and it ran for 6 seasons and 234 episodes before filming its final scene in 1963. During its original run, it was never the highest-rated show on television. It never swept major awards or dominated the cultural conversation the way some programs did. But audiences loved it with a quiet and lasting devotion that outlived the ratings charts entirely. It reached more than 80 countries. It was translated into 40 different languages. In Japan, the title was rendered in a way that led fans at airports to greet Jerry by calling him Happy Boy, a detail that manages to be both charming and slightly surreal. And underneath all of that success sat a business arrangement that almost nobody talked about at the time but that shaped Jerry Mathers' life in ways that are still being felt today. He became the first child actor in the history of American television to negotiate a deal that included a share of the show's merchandising revenue. Lunchboxes. Board games. Toys. Clothing. Every Leave It to Beaver product that carried his image or the show's name generated income connected directly to the boy playing Beaver Cleaver. The arrangement later became standard practice across the industry. But in 1957, nobody had done it before. Jerry Mathers did it first. And that decision, made on his behalf before he was old enough to fully understand its implications, quietly guaranteed that no matter what happened next, the show would continue paying him long after the cameras stopped rolling. When Leave It to Beaver filmed its final episode in 1963, Jerry Mathers was 15 years old. He was recognizable everywhere. His face was on merchandise sitting in homes across the country. The show was already moving into syndication, which meant new audiences were discovering it even as the original run came to a close. He had offers waiting. Other producers had already approached him about continuing his television career without any interruption at all. From the outside, the path forward looked completely obvious. You stay. You keep working. You ride the momentum while it is still carrying you. That is what the industry expected. That is what almost every performer in his position would have done without a second thought. Jerry Mathers did the opposite. He turned down a new television series. Not because the offer was bad. Not because the script failed to interest him or the money fell short of what he wanted. He turned it down because accepting it would have meant returning to studio school instead of attending a real high school with real classmates who would know him as Jerry rather than as Beaver. And that distinction mattered to him more than the offer itself. He enrolled at Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks, California, and he did something that almost no child actor of his generation ever got the chance to do. He lived like a normal teenager. He played football. He spent time with friends who had no particular interest in his television career. He sat in ordinary classrooms and moved through ordinary school days and built ordinary friendships that had nothing to do with Hollywood or cameras or the carefully maintained image of America's favorite television family. That was what he wanted. And he wanted it clearly enough to give up something significant in order to have it. What makes that choice remarkable is not simply that he made it. What makes it remarkable is that he understood, at 15, something that many performers only learn after the damage has already been done and the opportunities have already passed. He saw how easily a young actor could become permanently trapped inside a single version of himself. Once the public fixes a child in a beloved role, the industry tends to follow. Casting directors struggle to imagine that face doing anything else. Audiences resist the change. The performer grows older, but the perception never quite catches up, and the gap between who they are becoming and who everyone insists they still are grows wider every year until it becomes impossible to close. Jerry saw that danger clearly. He saw it while he was still young enough to do something about it. And so he did something about it. He stepped away from the machine while it was still running smoothly, while his name still meant something, while the phone was still ringing with offers. He stepped away not in defeat but in clarity. And the life he built in the space that opened up because of that decision turned out to be far richer and far more interesting than anything Hollywood would have handed him if he had simply stayed. The years that followed surprised almost everyone who had watched him grow up on screen. He formed a rock band in high school, with a name that made the joke impossible to miss. He called it Beaver and the Trappers. The choice was playful and self-aware and told you everything you needed to know about how he carried the association with his famous role. Not as a burden. Not as something to escape or deny. But as something he could hold lightly, with humor, and on his own terms. He had already recorded a single in 1962, before the show even ended, featuring Don't Cha Cry on one side and Wind Up Toy on the other. The songs did not set the charts on fire, but the fact that a 12-year-old sitcom star was recording rock music while still appearing weekly in one of America's most beloved family programs tells you something important about his energy and his confidence and his refusal to be defined by a single lane. After high school came a decision that surprised people even more than leaving acting had. He enlisted in the 146th Airlift Wing of the California Air National Guard, a unit that had picked up the informal nickname the Hollywood Guard, and he served from 1966 to 1969. He volunteered. Nobody drafted him into it. He joined because he believed it was right, and he did it during a period when wearing a military uniform in public was not always met with admiration or respect. A typing class he had taken in high school turned out to matter more than anyone could have predicted. The Air National Guard needed someone who could type, and because Jerry could, he ended up working at headquarters as an aide to a colonel serving under a general. In 1967, he appeared at the Emmy Awards in full military dress uniform and presented an award alongside child actress Angela Cartwright. There he was, one of the most recognized faces from American family television, standing under the lights of a national broadcast in uniform, representing a version of himself that had nothing to do with Beaver Cleaver and everything to do with the man he was quietly becoming. After finishing his service in 1969, he followed through on the plan he had always carried. He enrolled at the University of California, Berkeley, studied philosophy, and paid his own way using money earned during his childhood career. He had handled those earnings carefully, placing them into treasury bills and commercial paper that generated steady returns. In 1974, he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in philosophy. He then moved into banking and later into real estate development. He owned a pawn shop. He ran a catering company. He built a full and functioning adult life entirely outside the spotlight, and he did it so completely and so quietly that when a newspaper printed a small item claiming he had died in Vietnam, there was nobody in place to correct it quickly enough to stop the story from spreading. He was alive, sitting in a college dorm room, holding a newspaper that announced his own death. And the world, for a moment, believed it. But the world was wrong. It had always underestimated what Jerry Mathers was capable of. And when he eventually returned to acting in 1983, older and grounded and entirely sure of who he was, he did not return as someone crawling back to the only thing he knew. He returned as a man who had lived a complete life and was choosing, freely and deliberately, to add one more chapter to it. The role no longer owned him. He owned it. And that quiet, patient, deeply considered reversal of power is what separates his story from nearly every other child star story ever told. He did not survive Hollywood. He outthought it.